Welcome everyone. We're just taking a few more seconds to allow everyone coming in. Right. Great. Okay. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our series of Growing as a Community here at UC Davis Health. My name is Mercedes Piedra, and I am one of the directors for the Office for Health Equity, Diversity and Inclusion. Today we're going to have a wonderful panel to hear about their responses to the challenges with the racism pandemic that we're currently undergoing. With the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, we were wanting to, most organizations were looking to see how best to serve communities around anti-racism, and UC Davis Health was no different. As we are an academic institution, we're wanting to have our communities internally and externally be able to see into our health system and show some examples of the work that we're doing across our campus. Today, we're highlighting our family and community medicine unit, and we have their panel here. And I'm going to call on the panelists to introduce themselves. So we'll start with Mika.
Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Mika Godzich. I'm a family medicine doctor and I am faculty here in the Department of Family and Community Medicine. I'm the Associate Residency Program Director, and I'm also Director of the Academic Coaching Program for our medical students. Glad to be here, thank you.
Thank you, Mika. Sarah.
Hi, welcome everyone. I'm also thrilled to be here today. My name is Sarah Marshall, and I am our Family Medicine Residency Program Director.
Thanks, Sarah. Shelley.
Hi everyone, I'm Shelley Henderson. I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm on the faculty in Family and Community Medicine. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. And Tony.
Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Durant. I'm the professor and chair for the Family Medicine Department and Family and Community Medicine, I should say, and extremely honored and pleased to be here today and participating.
Thank you all. And so what we're going to do is talk about some foundations of what our Department in Family Community Medicine did to launch their efforts and their experiences of coming together as a unit against anti-racism and specifically against anti-Blackness. And so without further ado, I'm going to open it up to our panels to start talking about their process to serve in this capacity. Mika?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I just want to give you all some context for why we're all here. We're all part of the Department of Family and Community Medicine here at UC Davis, and we are deeply attached to the values of family medicine. And family medicine values are person-centered and community-centered, and they are anchored in the belief that with the expertise of medical and healthcare teams, people can live their best lives. And so when it comes to thinking about how to support people live their best lives, anti-racism is a core principle of this. And it underlies a lot of what we do, and yet there is more work to do to make that explicit. And so what specifically happened here that we'd like to tell you all the story of is in the context of George Floyd's killing, we were all profoundly dismayed and distraught and and felt compelled to engage with action within our department, and specifically around upholding our values of family medicine. There's a role to play that I think we all wanted to understand and determine and move on. And in the days that followed George Floyd's killing, I reached out to Tony as my chair and asked if there was room for our department to put out a statement naming those values of family medicine, and how the killing of a Black man at the hands of the police was something that our profession was profoundly distraught and dismayed and upset by, and wanted to do everything possible to name how we could take action to prevent further events and be part of a solution. And so I reached out to Tony in his role as chair, and I reached out to Sarah in her role as the residency program director. And for those of you who are not part of the medical world, family medicine residents are people who have DOs and MDs and are doing a further course of study to become board certified in family medicine. And so we train a little under 50 residents in our program, and these are physicians who are learning how to be family doctors. And so Sarah, in her role as program director, guides that program. And beyond that, our department is made up of about 20 faculty members, and we have about 10 administrative staff members. So my desire in reaching out to both Tony and Sarah was to take a stand and to say something publicly, and I'll let Tony and Sarah describe how they received that.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute there. So, well, first of all, when Mika had reached out, I had similarly thought, you know, this is something we probably need to do a departmental response to, but had held back. And it was actually very liberating and wonderful that when Mika reached out, because it sort of helped me process some of the doubt I had about whether this was something that we should do as the departmental level. And it helped me process, actually, as I started to try to draft a statement that then Mika and Sarah added to. It was surprisingly difficult to do that. And I thought surprisingly, because this is something I felt strongly about, you know, it clearly was wrong. This is something that is it's a horrible specific example of a very general public health issue. There are organizations in the country that have called out police violence against Black people and people of color as a public health crisis. And I thought it made me think hard about why it was so hard to write the statement, why it was so hard to get started. And the more I processed that, I realized that running in the background were these sort of narratives and dialogues from extended family that didn't have the same view of this issue, that you know, people that I otherwise respect and love and admire, that you know, didn't have the same sort of view of this as a public health issue, and maybe had other explanations for why this was happening. And that was painful, but it was also necessary, because it helped me realize that even more so, this was an important statement to write. And once I was able to sort of get those feelings and thoughts out in the background into the conscious, I was able to move past them and draft a statement, and then send it to Mika and Sarah. So it was liberating, if painful, but I think that's the type of, you know, we'll touch more on this hopefully during the session, but that's the type of anti-racism engagement, personal engagement with this issue that I think, for at least for white people in particular, is extremely necessary to start to identify key issues that are holding us back in this realm.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Tony shared was a very similar process to what I went through. As a white straight woman, I was really upset in the process of trying to come up with something of my own to say was really surprisingly difficult. And I spent the weekend, as Mika talked about relationships being really important at forming this, Mika and I spent, I think probably a couple of hours on the phone that weekend, and like lots of text messages back and forth, and lots of Mika sending me, look at this on Twitter, look at this on Twitter, do this, think about it this way. And so honestly, I felt like I was getting some really important mentorship at an early stage to help me. It was pretty formational for me to figure out like, okay, it's important for me to be really uncomfortable right now in this, and I have to do it anyway, which felt really counter to what I was trying to do as a leader. And that's an experience that I think was really, really important to me. And I think as I work with our residents and try to come up with what my role is as a leader, as I take on with this fabulous crew that we have, anti-racism work, that it really helped me appreciate that my role is to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and to keep really looking out for the places where I am prone to oversight and to making mistakes. And this really was the beginning of that process for me recently.
And so those statements went out, and I it's interesting because I have friends and folks who checked in with me about what it was like to have to do that work that Sarah just described, and that Tony described, and it's not easy to be in that role of the person who is having those hard conversations with people who are embarking on a journey of a public accountability around this, and yet it also felt important that I was able to be in a space where I could have those conversations with leadership who could receive that information and model for an entire department of trainees and my colleagues and staff members of what our values are as a department. So even though that work was quite hard to have those conversations, it felt very, very important and gave a sense of purpose in a time where when you're experiencing grief, it's really nice to have a sense of you're doing something and engaging. So that was really just the start of something, was putting out statements. And, that's never enough. And so then as a group, we began having more conversations about what comes next. And Tony actually came up with this concept of the 21-day challenge. And I would love to have him talk about that.
Sure. I mean, I think this was another example to start with of the relationships being the important foundation, because after the statement, I don't remember who initiated what, but we agreed to circle back and sort of touch base and say, now what? And in looking at different options, I think in the discussion, my initial inclination, and maybe this resonates with other folks who are in position of privilege, was to say, how can we start fixing things? How can we start moving forward and making changes? And while I don't think anybody felt that wasn't important, I think Mika in particular helped to gently help me understand that we probably need to understand more about where everybody in the department's starting from first, and what the actual key barriers or issues are. Sometimes I think as leaders, we're trained to make quick, decisive actions sometimes, but that can also completely miss the actual root causes. So that's what led to the idea. As I started looking further into the 21-day types of challenges, I think I actually heard about it on NPR, that trusted source of information. And it sounded fascinating, and I went and looked at different ones, but the Eddie Moore challenge looked like a good option. And I think what appealed to us is that there's 3 versions. There's one for somebody who's just in the early stages of self-discovery. There's one that's for somebody who's really past that stage and wants to, and is prepared for, or maybe already engaged in activism and advocacy. And then there's the 3rd one, which is really for self-care, for people who may either be on the receiving end of all of the issues related to racism and is feeling the stresses of that, or somebody who is maybe not a person of color, but is starting to heal their own wounds as they come to the realization that, yeah, I'm a product of a pretty racist society. So, we didn't require people to do it, but we certainly encouraged people repeatedly. And I do think having chair level investment and involvement is critical in this, as well as other key internal leaders such as residency director and associate residency director. So, and speaking personally, I think even as somebody who's done quite a bit of exploration of this over the years and has taught about implicit bias and things like that, I learned a ton through the 21-day challenge in a way that I think is very different than just intermittently engaging. I think doing it for 3 weeks in a row, that may not seem like a lot, but if you really take it seriously and try to engage in some way with the issues on a daily basis, it is transformational in important ways.
And so for those of you who might not know about the 21-day challenge, we'll have a link within a short PowerPoint we're going to share. It's a collection of short documents on racism, and the documents take multiple formats. They can be readings, they can be video clips, they can be music, and they are centered on anti-Blackness and the American experience. And it is something put together by Eddie Moore Jr., who's an incredibly thoughtful man who has really thought about how to put together ways for people to engage with this work on a recurrent way so that it actually sticks. Too many times people get a touch of something and then it goes away and they're done with it for the year until the next horrible event happens, because they keep on happening. So I think, what was wonderful about this as an opportunity is that it was a sustained exposure to anti-Black racism for all of our department members who were able to engage on their own time. The way that we supported it was with our administrative staff sending daily reminders to all the department members, and just a gentle, hey, have you done your work today? And then we moved forward with that by following up with the grand rounds when the entire department came together to discuss it. But before that, I want to touch briefly on the fact that we had a faculty meeting because the faculty meeting happened in that 21-day frame, and we tried to put together something so that we could really engage all of our faculty members and check in with folks about where they were at, what did they understand of this, what was their commitment to it, and do it in a safe way. And Shelley, perhaps you can talk about the structure of that faculty meeting.
Yes. So as Mika said, our faculty, we get together weekly, and Tony was really thoughtful about carving out this time when just the faculty could meet and talk about the anti-racism work that we wanted to engage in as a department. And I'll just share a little bit of my background at UC Davis. For the 12 years that I've been here, I have facilitated these conversations among medical students and residents and our trainees, conversations around implicit bias and anti-racism work. And this was the first time that I really had been able to step into that role of facilitating conversation among faculty members. And as many of you probably know, in education, there might be this perception that faculty members or educators have it all figured out and they're the experts. And this was such an eye-opening experience for all of us to sit in that learner role and to hold ourselves accountable to learning a new way of looking at these issues. So it was hard work, and it continues to be hard work. I think what we were all trying to grapple with is that tension between moving ahead of where people are at in their learning process and staying present with people who need the support to move along. And that's a difficult thing for facilitating these conversations. And I think Tony, was really graceful in how he sort of grappled with his position as a leader and still participating in the process. That was really important for all of our faculty to see, and really opened up space for people to start talking. The last thing I'll say about that process is that it does take time, and many times we wanted to get ahead of ourselves and we were feeling sort of impatient with the process. And I think that we just have to keep bringing ourselves back to the present and staying right with the people who need the support the most to grapple with these issues.
I'll just take a quick minute to also say, speaking of the people who are at different stages, we were also doing a parallel process with our residents. And then Sarah, maybe you want to talk about that residency admin meeting we had with them.
Absolutely. I think similar to Shelley feeling like this was a new space for doing it, I think our residency program comes together on a monthly basis to talk about all sorts of administrative things, what changes there are in the curriculum, all the things that you might imagine. And we really made a point to and honestly, we kind of surprised them with this meeting, but we made it a point to come together and really hold space for starting that conversation with residents. And we actually shared reading an excerpt from the New York Times together, and that was a really profound experience. I think, as we all learn with Zoom, reading together can be challenging, but it also, I think, was a moment where we came together and had it provided a shared context as a launching point to really begin our work as a residency program with anti-racism, and thinking about what does that mean for the work that we're doing, what does that mean for the teaching that we're doing, what does that mean for the recruitment that we're doing, and where do we begin, as well as, and most importantly, what does that mean for how we take care of each other in the spaces that we all hold.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the way that we structured our family medicine faculty meeting was Tony presented the importance of why we were undertaking action around anti-racism as a department, and talked through some of the vulnerabilities that were expressed here, and modeled that for his department in a wonderful way. And then I did a presentation, a very short presentation on anti-racism, and I was asked to share it here today, and I'm kind of going to buzz through it pretty quickly, but my goal with that was to really lay foundational groundwork for everyone to be able to have the same language to talk about things, and provide a structural framework to be able to be having a conversation about the same things. And so I'm going to share my screen. After I did this presentation, we then had Shelley facilitate people's experience of the presentation and talking about this work. So here, let's see if I can get this to share. Hold on one second. There we go. Y'all seeing that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So yeah, so I always give the disclaimer that I'm not an expert. This is my expertise. This is the family I was raised in. So race was my beautiful parents and my brother. This is where my awareness of race comes from. It comes from day one, because I'm an American in this country that is racist. So, and then I brought up why address racism in family medicine. The American Association of Family Medicine actually put out a statement about why it is part of our core values as a family medicine organization to be anti-racist, specifically in the context of discriminatory policing. I did a brief review of what racism is, referring to the wonderful Dr. Kamara Jones, and then described it further as a system. So my disclaimer here for the audience was really to emphasize that I think this is important, that it's important to not call people racist, but to talk about racist systems and racist actions versus naming people as racist, because that can lead to a shutting down of the conversation. So that was the contextualization with this slide. And then I just left this slide here for a minute. And my goal with doing that was to have everyone feel a little bit of the sting of, perhaps some personal pride and being an American, and grapple with that tension of saying, but based on that definition that we just saw, this society that we live in, that we are members of, is racist. So what do we do with that? And so, I presume that everyone wanted to change that. And so here are some historical approaches to managing that. And so things like being colorblind, using cultural competency, implicit bias awareness, and cultural humility are some approaches that have been used. So I went through each one. And my goal was to really say, why anti-racism versus these methods? And so I just went through each one and talked about the fact that, you can say that color doesn't matter, and yet economic disparities are egregious and have persisted forever, and they are current and contemporaneous. So obviously race does matter in our society. Cultural competency. So this is, for those who don't know, this is about knowing your patient. And so this is from a healthcare lens. Knowing your patient's cultural background should inform your care. And yet, and I gave an example of a nursing textbook, and it's in medicine, it's not specific to nursing, far from it. All aspects of medicine have unfortunate examples of creating broad, gross generalizations that are really at risk of perpetuating harmful stereotypes. So cultural competency really can't do it, because we run the risk of really harming people through them. Implicit bias awareness. This is one that comes up all the time, and the wonderful Jennifer Eberhardt has been working in this forever and got a MacArthur grant for it, and yet she has been working with police departments for the last decade, including Oakland and Richmond and Palo Alto. And even though she has been teaching these departments what implicit bias is, and the fact that we all have some predispositions in our mind, it's not enough to just train people in that. It doesn't change behaviors in ways that we have yet to experience as being needed, what's needed. And then finally, the cultural humility model is a wonderful model of self-reflection of the individual, recognizing that curiosity is the place where we can really grow in terms of knowing that we don't know as we interact with patients and as we interact with care team members. But the systemic anti-racism isn't necessarily addressed through that lens. And so, though it can inform it by far, it's very important for it. So why anti-racism? And so, go back to Angela Davis, go back to James Baldwin. They always have the answers, and it really is about saying it's not enough to just not be racist. We have to be anti-racist if we really want to change things. And then I described a model of anti-racism, which includes recognizing it, taking action, and moving towards a dismantling of systemic racism. And the underpinning of doing that work, this is I find a useful model, is Fred Jones and Tima Okun's 6 R's, which are read, reflect, remember, take risks, expect rejection, and build relationships. So the read is really what we were doing in that 21-day challenge, is learning and making sure that that people had a real understanding of the depth and breadth of anti-Blackness in this country. The reflection is what Shelley has been so important in helping people process the experience of reading that and sitting with the fact that a lot of us are participating in racist systems and grappling with that. The remembering is naming where we ourselves may have been part of ongoing systems of white supremacy and really need to think about how to change that and what can be done differently. And then the take risks. I mean, I think that this is really important, especially in the context of recognizing where you have spheres of influence. So, you know, Sarah has influence as a residency program director, and Tony as a chair, and I think we all have our own spheres of influence, and taking risks is part of being anti-racist, and being willing to acknowledge that doing so may lead to rejection. And so for people who are not, who are embarking on this journey of anti-racism, expecting rejection can facilitate the willingness to do the work, because I think that if you're not prepared to be rejected, you are at risk of really giving up at the first try. And so that has to be part of the process. And then finally, and this is what we were anchoring all of this work in, is relationships with people who you're doing the work with, and being willing to be vulnerable and talk through the things that are hard, and really be anchored in the emotions versus the headspace, which is sometimes hard for us as academics to do, but it is incredibly important to be able to move forward and to actually implement change. You know, there are all these, I'm going to paraphrase multiple people who say that, you know, if it's not uncomfortable, it's not happening. If you know, no change happens without some form of protest. All of those things hold true when it comes to anti-racism. And I think that the more that you have a community of people who are doing the work, the more you can recognize together where those changes have brought you and processed together. And so then I just ended on this, you know, what's next, and let's figure it out together. I have some links to the just that Eddie Moore challenge linked here, and then a link to our website. And I think we're going to send out some of that information for all of you. So I did that brief presentation in our faculty meeting, and then I also did it in a grand rounds that we held at the end of our 21-day challenge, so that people all had the same framework to work from as we processed and had conversations about how this made us feel. And then I think it's really important to do that work, because as both Tony and Sarah named, I think we all have a rush to do the checkbox thing and say, okay, what's next? I've done my anti-racism work, which is, you know, it feels absurd, and yet sometimes we're just compelled to rush forward. And some of that is, you know, part of the culture of white supremacy. There's an urgency that is built into the way that we've been acculturated, and naming that as a group and having a change in that culture is huge. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. And so I'm going to let my colleagues add anything if I've missed.
I think the only other thing, and this maybe was the next thing, but is we've also then more recently, after having a chance to reflect on the 21-day challenges and talk more as a team, have linked ongoing, because I think exactly what Mika says is the case. You know, there's this tendency to say, we've done that now, we're moving on. We don't want to do that. I mean, we want this to be an ongoing part of department culture and department development. And so we've linked ongoing discussions and hopefully efforts in the near future to make some changes as we clarify where those need to be made to our strategic planning process. Not that we're saying that anti-racism is a strategic goal, because that's not the case. It's an ongoing part of how we do business and culture. But linking it with that process has been very valuable, because it gives us built-in opportunities to reflect and document and basically make a commitment and accountability to this being an ongoing issue in the department. And I think that with that type of mindset, anybody that's been in academic healthcare, for example, you know that when you create a strategic plan, there's always certain pillars that are part of that. But these culture issues such as wellness of your staff and faculty and anti-racism efforts, I think, are equally important and underpinnings of all those things that we do. So it's been helpful in that regard, and hopefully will keep us honest and on task as we make this a permanent part of what we do.
Yeah, it's really lifelong learning. It's not a one and done, check the box, right? As you were illustrating in your examples. And so the deeper self-reflection, lifelong learning, and the community, bringing your community, your team, all of your peers together and really be on the same page. I was wanting to check in with Shelley also for the immense amount of work that you do here at UC Davis Health for the last 12 years.
Yeah, it certainly has been a journey, and I don't know that I feel, any more equipped to facilitate these conversations. I mean, I've certainly learned a lot, but these are such delicate conversations that require safety and a pace that is manageable. And that does require expertise. And so as a department, we are investing in getting some outside facilitation so that I can also participate in this process. But it really is not one person is going to meet everyone's needs. And so I think having multiple approaches, multiple opportunities to have these conversations is so essential. And because everyone processes these concepts at a different rate. And so for people who are more introverted, and that was actually something that was really noticeable in our conversations with the faculty, when we gave it time and space, people who have not historically been more vocal around these topics were able to speak up. And so that was really nice to see. And they did feel like honest conversations. People were sharing some pretty personal histories. And so I think that we were successful in establishing that safety for people.
Definitely. And I appreciate that you're sharing the voices that usually don't say anything. And I know for so many people of color, and especially our African-American community, we live contracted lives because we're limited because of the oppression and the racism. And so what a breath of fresh air to be able to know that the genuineness of your department to come and just be vocal and finally talk about it even shows up in our health outcomes, right? We can take that breath, we can be a little less stressed out about things, and especially during this climate. So Mika, I was going to just turn to you also, because I want everyone to know that our physicians here are just huge advocates for anti-racism. But the patience that I kept hearing come up, right? The patience for everyone's developmental process. We have folks that know nothing, and we have the experts also, which tend to be our students and other community members who we just love, and they keep us on task and accountable also. But the vulnerability, right, for not only individuals, but individuals at all levels, from staff to students to residents to leaders. And Dr. Durant, you're the chair of the department. That constant vulnerability, I think it's important to also stress that you're doing it as a community. And so sometimes it's easier to take those risks that we were outlining and be uncomfortable in community versus being that lone ranger, which I think we've all been at times of our lives in this effort.
Yeah, I mean, I think, thank you for naming all of those points, Mercedes. I think, for me, my work is anchored in my experience with my patients. I am a woman who is Black, who works with Black patients, including in prenatal care, and I know these patients often come to me with the recognition that they might not need to be as nervous about the care delivered. And carrying that informs everything I do as I work with my colleagues, right? Because I want to honor the trust that my patients put in me and the privilege that I have to hear their stories. And I want to share that with my colleagues from my vantage point, to be able to say, you know, as a Black woman, my patients tell me things that they might not tell you. I want that to inform all of your work as well. And that is why, you know, when I'm having harder conversations with my colleagues where I might get impatient and I might want to be a little further along, I am anchored in what my patients have shared with me, and that makes everything worthwhile. And so I think that, you know, I have such a privilege to be able to advocate in my role for my patients who have experienced racism, and to be able to support learners in integrating these notions from the start and not having to learn them 20 years into a career. So my work with students and my work with residents is just so meaningful to me in my ability to hopefully support new generations of clinicians in providing anti-racist care that is actively engaged in anti-racism. So I'm very fortunate to be part of this community.
Yes, and if anything, the work that you're doing also reflects the intentionality, right? It's not only lifelong learning, but the purposeful pause, the purposeful intention, the purposeful discussions. And to do that, you do have to slow down and not just react. As if we're just constantly reacting, we can do more harm to our communities, our learners, our patients, our colleagues. So I wanted to check in with Dr. Marshall.
Yeah, the two threads that I've been holding as we've been having these conversations. One is just Mika's slides are really awesome. It's now the third time that I've seen them, and I feel like it causes me to pause and just really appreciate the work at hand each time I see them. So I'm honored to get to work with a colleague who is as strong and brave as Mika is. So that has been going through in that context of relationships and care. Like, she's really awesome, you guys. And she's doing some really hard and good work, and we're really fortunate to have her at UC Davis. So that piece, and along with that, just in my own recent work and appreciation is another website we found, and I have held with me the values of white supremacy, and the fact of how much that shows up in our academic lives and work. And we've been talking about the need to rush through things and have our points made. And actually the lack of appreciation is one of those things that I find in myself personally. I'm always cued into the next thing that I need to be doing. And this process has really, the need to slow down is something that I really struggle with. And I'm seeing it in new ways and appreciating the value of it in ways that were just really blind spots for me. So the work is immense, and I'm so thrilled to be doing it. And this learning is super important. And I feel really fortunate to be at UC Davis and to be led and mentored in a place that has such strong values, and to be doing the work.
Thanks, Sarah. And so one question is, as we talked about the foundational needs to advance the work to date that you're doing, what other foundations did your unit need for this to flourish?
I think the way that I'll try to answer that question is to say, the ongoing conversations and that sense of community, because what I think we may need is maybe not the whole picture. So I think there's that. And then the work to be done, or the work to continue doing, is really think about the specifics of where racism shows up in the work of our residency program, of our patient care delivery, of our recruitment and retention of faculty and residents, and the curriculum, and the ways that we want to be both undoing some of the work that is inevitably there, and really promoting that anti-racism work is part of the curriculum that every single family physician needs to receive and to become really familiar with.
The other thing, if I might mention, is in terms of resources and things needed, is again, the other value of tying this work to strategic planning is that there's money set aside in strategic plan budgets. And so we are planning to resource this with, and we're not settled yet on what this is going to look like exactly, but with the external consultation that would be, someone who has a proven track record in this area of helping departments and organizations move forward from the foundational work and making sure you have that right to potentially instituting change, and then staying accountable to that. And so I really think from a department chair or senior leadership standpoint, apart from being a constant vocal advocate and sponsor, putting resources forward is the key. Really not much is going to change without that.
Thank you, Dr. Durant. We do have one question from one of our attendees about facing any resistance from your colleagues or anyone else, and how did you navigate any, if any? And I'll open that to the panel. Anyone can answer.
I could certainly take a stab, although Sarah, you look like you might have been weighing. I mean, we did have, just without a lot of detail, because I know we're short on time, that I think inevitably, if you are doing this work, you will face resistance, or at least pushback in different ways. We did have, and I heard through our administrative leader, that there were staff that were quite concerned about, whether this would be something where they would be, I think made to feel ashamed or bad, or whether they really had to participate. I think a lot of that is actually quite understandable in terms of power dynamic, because again, you've got senior professors, and you may have somebody that's been an administrative support person for just a few months. There's huge potential power disparities there on top of all the other issues. So I would say yes. We also, for better or for worse, and I suppose this could be questioned, we didn't require everybody to do the challenge, for example, but again, strongly encouraged. It's not like I, checked off whether they turned something in or anything like that. We didn't make people turn things in. I think when you're starting, especially, that seemed like a prudent way to go. Sarah, Mika, or Shelley, I don't know if you have other thoughts to add.
I think that feels really true. And I think our hope and our best place to start with is that we wanted to start modeling by example. And that feels like a place that we could open a door in which our staff, administrative staff, clinic staff, could jump in and feel like there was support in that way.
Great. Shelley?
I don't know. Let me start again. I have no doubt that there were staff and faculty who were fearful, who were maybe feeling some defensiveness or resistance to this process. And I think that we proceeded knowing that that is a normal part of this work. And so we made space. We tried to address that by not calling people out, by just acknowledging that this is hard work. And we made space for people to be uncomfortable and sit with that, and without the judgment, without the pressure to be somebody different overnight. That this is as you put it, Mercedes, a developmental process That was the tenor we were trying to create. And I'm sure that we still have people in our department who are skeptical or who are worried about where this work is taking us. And I think our goal is just to continue making space for that and acknowledging that that's part of this process.
It definitely is. So I'm hearing a lot of patience, a lot of acceptance on people's developmental processes, but I'm also hearing a lot of forgiveness, a lot of grace, a lot of compassion, which, although you stress relationships, it sounds like your relationships are founded in those elements and qualities. For us to take risks and to abate our fears, we have to have that community that is embedded in empathy and compassion and grace around our humanity, especially with anti-Blackness. There's no way we're not going to hurt someone in some capacity. We always, we're developing new skills, new ways of being that we haven't done for how many years of our country and globally and in humanity. So would that be an accurate assessment? Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what I hear. I want to take just some time to share my screen so that our attendees can see the website that our Department of Family and Community Medicine has around anti-racism. So let me just have a second to do so. Here it is. That's the statement, department statement. Let me see. Give me just a second. Oh, I can't do that. Here we go. So this is what Department of Family Community Medicine looks like. Their statement is listed here, so everyone is welcome to review the statement that Dr. Durant and the department put together, along with the resources, additional resources for our attendees, and this is open to the community. And I think this is very poignant, is what we have here of white privilege. I have white privilege as a white person because I can do all these things without thinking twice about it. And you'll see the list of birding. I can go birding, I can jog, I can relax, I can have a car crash, and so on and so forth. And it's just such a powerful, powerful statement of getting into the shoes of another individual. And so if we're able to do all these things without any regard to our safety, then that is definitely privilege for all of us to take the time to look at. So our panelists, any parting words for our attendees?
I'm typing in the chat, but I would just say there's a question about recruitment and residency applications, and I'll just quickly say that, like, yes, absolutely, we are working to actively do that in ways where we really holistically review resident applications as our fall application season comes. Absolutely.
Right, and the department's looking at everything from faculty recruitment, staff, residents, students, everything possible. Dr. Durant.
Yeah, and I was just going to basically the same topic. I mean, I think what's clear also from this effort, hopefully, is that having a diverse as possible faculty and learner group is going to drive change. I mean, there's, clearly I'm hugely supportive of an investment of these changes. Shelley and Sarah are, and yet I think it's clear Mika was the driving factor. And I think that is, that says it all, basically. I think that will be a high priority for change in terms of recruitment. It's a huge challenge, particularly for faculty, but it's got to happen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Durant. Mika?
Well, thank you, Tony, for creating a department culture that allowed me to have a voice and being receptive to this. I think that nothing happens unless there's trust, and I think that we've all worked on trusting each other. And I think that, you know, Tony and I had hard conversations about different topics before this, and we worked through a variety of professional things, and I think that lays the foundation for this kind of work. When you've had previous hard conversations, you know that you can trust the person to preserve the relationship as you work through the issue at hand. And I think that that's how it applied here. And so if there's anything I can encourage all of you to do is really determine the strength of the relationships that you have with your colleagues and your supervisors and your peers, and see where that strength that strength can be leveraged to action anti-racism. Because if you have those strong relationships, you can bring these issues to the forefront and make a change in a culture of an entire department, which then leads to huge things like actually having important conversations around recruitment and what do we want our department to look like, and how do we want to work with our patients, and what are our values. So again, it's the relationships.
Thank you, Mika. Shelley.
I'll just agree with everything that's being said. We have a lot of work ahead of us, but this feels like a new trajectory that we haven't been on before. And maybe it was certainly at the expense of George Floyd, but he won't be forgotten.
Thank you, Shelley. And all of the unarmed Black individuals across our nation that have been sacrificed is what we're dedicated to doing here at UC Davis Health. So we're hoping to be able to give you more examples and growth process in our growing as a community. And so I hope that our community appreciates being able to look in to the family community medicine department here at UC Davis. And as they're growing, they're going to learn. We're all going to learn this together. But so important to start showing some examples of us as a health system, as Dr. Henry Ton, our Associate Vice Chancellor's initiative for us to be an anchor institution for our communities, that we serve all of our communities. So to our attendees, this is the core of who UC Davis is becoming to be of service in anti-Blackness and anti-racism. So Black minds matter, Black bodies matter, Black lives matter. So thank you for attending today, and we'll be back next month for more information. So thank you and good night.